I'm Scott Hansen, host of NFL Red Zone. Lowe's knows Sundays are for football. That's why we're here to help you get your next DIY project done, even when the clock isn't on your side. Whether that's a new Filtrete filter or Bosch and Cobalt power tools, Lowe's has everything you need to feel like the MVP of DIY. So get it done and earn your Sunday. Shop now in-store and online. Lowe's, official partner of the NFL.
Back in early 2017, about 3 years after the launch of Brülosophy.com, I caved to the pressure from both fans of what we were doing as well as fellow contributors, and I started this podcast. At the time, I never really thought it'd become what it has or that I'd enjoy doing it as much as I do, yet here we are at episode 400. If you consider that our average episode length is about an hour and 15 minutes, that is over 500 hours of our voices droning on in your ears over the years. Absolutely wild to me. Anyway, it is time for another Brü A episode. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and today I'm joined by contributor Alex Shanks-Abel to answer a handful of questions submitted by patrons of Brülosophy.
Man, 400. That seems like an important number, even though I can't really think of any cultural references to the number 400. But yeah, no, I had a ton of fun last time, particularly when we got the chance to talk about some non-homebrewing related topics on a homebrew podcast. So yeah, let's get into it. I'll try to do fewer Hank Hill impressions this time.
Well, that might actually be a disappointment for some of our listeners, Alex. But you know, there is this thing with, I don't know why we organize our things around numbers the way that we do, but for whatever reason, even 100s, even 10s, I mean, every 10th episode we do a Brü A, there's just something meaningful about hitting that 100 mark. And the fact we've had 4 of those since 2017 really does just blow my mind. I mean, and we have no plans to stop. We're going to keep going. This is way too fun. And just judging by the feedback that we get, I do trust that at least some people out there are getting something meaningful out of this. Now, just a reminder that one of the many benefits of being a patron of Brülosophy is that we do prioritize their questions for these Brü A episodes. So if there's something you've wanted to know, or perhaps you've even emailed a question to us that we have not responded to yet, your best bet for getting it answered is to become a patron, which also happens to help us to keep doing what it is we're doing here. If that sounds shill, I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you, but our patrons truly are the reason that we're able to do this, and so we are going to continue giving them that benefit. If you're wondering what the hell a patron is, well, they're the incredibly gracious folks who appreciate what we're doing enough to support us over at patreon.com/Brülosophy, where by making a small monthly pledge, anywhere from $1 to $15, you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invitation to a monthly live Brew Day with somebody in the Brülosophy crew. We also have offer the opportunity to consult with a Brülosophy contributor about whatever it is you want to consult on every single month. So not to be overly redundant, but again, the fact of the matter is that we're only here today because of Patreon. As many people know, the beer world is struggling a bit lately, which has led to a lot of our previous sponsors being unable to continue supporting us how they used to. We've lost patrons. Thankfully, we've had some come in and fill those spots and help us to keep going. So if you like our content, you have our patrons to thank for. And if you want to help us out, you can do so by becoming one yourself over at patreon.com/Brülosophy. Huge thanks to everybody who has been supporting us over at Patreon and allowing us to continue to do this thing that we love so much. Another easy way to support us is by using the links found at Brülosophy.com/support when you're shopping online. Your experience doesn't change at all, and we get a little kickback for the referral. Finally, if you wouldn't mind letting us know what you think about this show by leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever it is you listen to podcasts, we would appreciate that as well. Feedback is brought to you by Clawhammer Supply, who are known for their incredible all-in-one electric brewing systems. I've brewed on both their 120 and 240-volt systems, and I'm telling you, these things are legit. Efficient, easy to use, with a relatively small footprint. You are not going to be disappointed with one of these units. Plus, the guys behind the company run a rad YouTube channel, which you can find by searching YouTube for Clawhammer Supply. If you're in the market for electric brewing gear or even just reasonably priced kettles and such, make sure to check out what Clawhammer Supply has to offer over at clawhammersupply.com, and don't forget to let them know Brülosophy sent you when you're checking out. That's clawhammersupply.com. All right, speaking of Clawhammer Supply, our feedback this week isn't really going to be feedback, but rather we just wanted to share some incredibly unfortunate news with our listeners. If you're familiar at all with the Clawhammer Supply YouTube channel, you likely know how great their content is, and one reason for that is Ross Jates, the long-haired, bearded fellow who's known for his quick-witted and hilarious remarks. Sadly, we received news a few weeks ago that he was recently informed that he only has about 6 months left to live. I mean, that is some heavy information. I can't imagine what hearing that must have been like for Ross, and my heart truly breaks even more for his wife, who, while actively coming to terms with the fact that her reality will soon be absent the most important person in her world, has to plan for a funeral and all that comes with the loss of a loved one. Ugh, I just cannot imagine. Just talking about it kills me, truly. Well, one of the more amazing things about this hobby is the community. I've been saying that for years, and I truly mean it. The way that we come together to help our fellow brewers out just blows my mind, and that's what we're doing for Ross. There's currently a GoFundMe set up, the funds of which will help his wife cover all of the costs of Ross's impending death. The link to this GoFundMe is in the description of the episode. I know times are tough for a lot of people, but for those who have the means, please consider making a donation to this legend of homebrewing. I know his wife, as well as the Clawhammer Supply crew, would greatly appreciate it, and so would we. We're thinking of you, Ross, and sending all of our positive thoughts and love your way. Alex, have you heard about this news yet?
Yeah, we talked about it a bit on the Brew Club Discord. Yeah, it's hard to say much about it. But Ross is a hilarious guy. It's kind of morbid, but I hope he gets to enjoy something of a living funeral these next few months.
Yeah.
My grandmother got something similar where she got to take the time to say goodbye to all of her grandkids, all of her family, and I hope Ross gets at least that gift. So, yeah, hearts out to you, Ross.
Yeah. I mean, life is only life with the, understanding that it won't always be there. And it's just when it's taken so early like this, and for something as stupid as cancer. I mean, fuck cancer so hard. And it just breaks my heart. He's such a good guy. Now, I will say that the humility that he has had just based on his social media posts throughout this time and the way he's dealing with it is oddly refreshing, I guess. It really seems like he's just got the support of his amazing wife and friends that's going to allow him to kind of live out the rest of his days, with some level of positivity. So heartbroken. Our hearts go out to you, Ross, and your family. And again, if you have the means, then please at least consider taking a look at the GoFundMe, read about his history a little bit, and consider making a pledge. All right, if you have show feedback you'd like us to address on a future episode, you could send it to feedback@brülosophy.com or leave us a note on social media. We'll be right back. There's no denying that stainless steel is the best material for brewing equipment, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of wort, comes with a domed lid to even further reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today.
We all know that designing recipes is really fun, and doing it well is so much easier with good software. We at Brülosophy recently made the switch to Brewfather, and honestly, y'all, we could not be happier. Brewfather utilizes the latest technology to bring you the most robust cloud-based recipe design software that can be accessed anywhere, on your phone, tablet, desktop, and even offline. It also works seamlessly with numerous third-party devices to make it easier to monitor every step of your brew. I know change can be difficult, but trust me when I say you need to go to brewfather.app today to try it out for yourself. That's brewfather.app.
Huge thanks to our incredible patrons who not only fund what it is we do here at Brülosophy, but submitted their Brü A questions for us to answer on this episode, which we love doing. Now, for this round, we got some very unique questions. One of the I would say groupings of questions that probably has the least amount of actual homebrew content. So if you're not into hearing about other stuff, this may not be the one for you. So the first question comes from patron Jeff, who said, "I have a 25 gallon." Now this is a homebrewing one. I have a 25-gallon mash lauter ton with a screen that's about 2 inches above the floor. I have a half-inch outlet on the wall under the screen. Many larger vessels have multiple outlets in the floor to better distribute the flow. Does the outlet location matter on the homebrew scale? Am I potentially over-sparging the grain bed closest to the outlet and under-sparging the far side, or does the screen equalize the flow and hydraulic gradient across the grain bed? Reference Darcy's Law. Alex, what the hell is Darcy's Law?
Yeah, sup, Jeff. For those who don't know, like me, well,
me.
Apparently, Darcy's Law states, in short, that kind of the rate of fluid flowing through a porous material like soil or a grain bed in this case is directly proportional to the driving force. It's not too crazy and pretty intuitive. I mean, if you heavily push water through an open filter, that water is going to travel fast, right? So just, yeah, basically it depends on the filter size and how much you're pushing. So clearly I'm not a physicist, and Marshall isn't either. I'll say, and also I'll say as a caveat that, I mean, all of my mashing woes were solved by a brew bag. But that said, I've brewed with a few others that I think have a pretty similar system as Jeff, so giant pinch of salt there, Jeff. First off, does the outlet location matter on the homebrew scale? I think it matters in the sense that outlets on the floor are going to be much more convenient from a draining perspective, because, I mean, an outlet on the side, even one close to the floor, seems like it'd be really annoying to get that, like, last liter of wort out. Second question is asking about undersparging on one end, oversparging on the other. I'm kind of on 5 minds on this, so I'm going to give you 5 half-assed responses, and you can decide what you like. The screen does help a little bit, but it's not going to, like, magically make the flow perfectly uniform. So, yes, you are going to have increased flow near the outlet. I mean, no question about that. And if you just kind of want to test how bad it is, I would fill up your MLT with just boring old water, and then I would add some water, maybe with some food coloring in it, to the test sparge and just kind of watch how that flows. You don't have to. I just kind of turn everything like this into an experiment. But are you going to notice? Are you oversparging? If you're writing in about a system that you're currently using and you aren't getting, like, tannic astringency, I personally wouldn't care. To me, the main perk of sparging is to squeeze a bit more efficiency out of your grain so that you save a few pennies per pint, which is to say I wouldn't, like, go out of my way to buy a new system just to bump up my efficiency from 81 to 83%. And also, if it's not obvious, I make a lot of questionable decisions as a brewer, and I like to mess around and see how hard I can push things before they break. I've never had astringency ever, but I not only squeeze my brew bag, I also squeeze my tea. So, yeah, anyways, I hope you have a better answer, Marshall.
Oh God, I'm not sure about that. It's funny that you know, prior to recording, we always chat. You know, the co-host and I always chat about whatever normal things. And one of the topics that we talked about prior to pressing record for this episode was this idea that just because we press the record button, you know, and then put out, you know, arrogantly put out our voices out there for other people to listen to, there's this presumption that we are somehow smarter than we are. And I'm here to tell you that's not true. The first time I heard of Darcy's Law was with your question, Jeff. And so I went and spent about 90 seconds reading about it. What you said, Alex, is what I saw. And to me, the way I interpreted that, and I could be way off, is basically wort is going to take the path of least resistance to getting out of the MLT. And what that means is that there could be some channeling depending on how you are performing your fly or your continuous or fly sparge. here's the thing. I never consistently fly sparged. Have I done fly sparging before? Sort of, like hybridized versions of it. But it's never been a method that I've latched onto and used consistently. I've batch sparged, I've brewed in a bag, which is kind of what I do these days on an electric system. One thing, Jeff asked, am I potentially over sparging the grain? I doubt it. I think it's like you, Alex. I have never had the experience of making a beer that had noticeable astringency, that tannin character that so many people fear. One thing I think a lot of homebrewers do overdo is think things, and I say that not as judgment, Jeff, because I'm one of those homebrewers. You should have seen my path to getting to where I'm at today was phenomenally more complicated than what you're asking about here. I mean, everybody thinks that if I just make these little changes, if I just follow this quote rule that I read about, in Narcissus' book from, the early 1900s or whatever, that, my beer is going to be better. And I'm just not so sure that's the case. That doesn't mean that I'm right. I'm not trying to be self-righteous here. Just that there are so many other things to focus on that actually do have a noticeable impact on your beer, that the fear of over sparging, particularly due to placement of your port on your MLT, I'm just not sure that's even worth the effort, but maybe it is for you. And there are things that you can do. Obviously, if tinkering around and overthinking these things is part of the fun of homebrewing, then I fully support it. Try different techniques, try putting in a different type of a loudering system into your MLT. Maybe it will make a difference, but I highly doubt. When I hear oversparging, maybe I'm just misinterpreting this, Alex. Oversparging to me is kind of the equivalent to am I eking out astringency? And I don't think you are. Well, exactly like you said, to me, the only reason anybody sparges really is to get as much of that, sugary goodness out of their grain as possible. And so those of us who don't care as much about that and who are willing to lose an additional 20 cents per batch, just do batch sparging or brew in a bag is how I view it. So again, I don't think you have much to worry about as long as your beer tastes good, Jeff. That's where I stand.
Yeah, that's kind of where I sit too, which may be a little unsatisfying, but I think it's fine.
Well, our lack of intelligence on the matter is probably the unsatisfying thing. Hopefully we don't lose listeners because we're dumb. Yeah.
Hopefully we can be doubly unsatisfying on this for you, Jeff. We got next question. A little bit less beer related, but still Brülosophy related. Comes from listener Craig Graham. He's one of the Houston Brew Club bros.
Oh, right on.
He asks, what does episode 400 Marshall tell episode 0 Marshall?
Oh, I'm the one who put this list together of questions, and even when I saw that, I was like, how am I going to respond to that? I think there's some pragmatic stuff that episodes 400 Marshall, that if I could go back to, March of 2017 when I finally decided to record that first episode, I think there's some, practical stuff that I would tell myself, like, hey, we figured out the best format for the show. Do this. I think there are things that I'd tell myself it's just not worth the effort. I'm not going to go into detail on what that is, but I think more than anything, I if I could, I'd go back and say, hey, don't be overly confident that homebrewing is going to stay this crazy popular thing that it was back then. I mean, it was huge. It was big enough to not deter me from starting a business like Brülosophy. I mean, that's what this is a business, and the way it looks today is just 180 degrees different than how it looked, maybe not content wise, but the underbelly of what we do at Brülosophy and the way that we generate revenue, and the fact that we've had to really rely and lean on the people who listen to this show to keep us alive, as opposed to sponsors, which I think is the more traditional way of staying afloat, has been very eye-opening. It's been insanely humbling. So those are the things that I would tell myself back then. I don't think in terms that now I don't want to like belittle this idea that we part of the way that we learn and you know, is through the experience of figuring it out. I would never sacrifice that. I have no qualms about the way we did things in the early days or anything that we've done on the show. I just, you know, if I could skip it and get to the point sooner, I guess I would do that. But really, it's more aspirational in nature about like where things are headed. I mean, just looking back from today, it's wild for me to consider how things were for Brülosophy just 3 to 4 years after we got started. I mean, we were relatively well known, which was never an intention or an expectation of mine. We were getting invites off the hook to go to international places and to speak at these rad conferences, many of which aren't even happening anymore. And it's just so the landscape is so different that I think that would be my big thing, is like, a heads up, buddy, you know, things are going to change and it's not going to be for the best. So be prepared for that. And maybe I would have come up with some prophylactic type of things to you know, to have helped us through some of the more surprisingly difficult times that we've experienced. But I think that's where I'm at. Now, you haven't been with us since the very beginning, Alex, but you've been around quite a while. How would you respond to this? What would 400th episode Alex say to whatever it was, 300th episode or 250th episode Alex?
Yeah, and also who knows if, like, kind of curious, you know, if 8 years from now you're going to tell yourself today a similar thing of, look out, buddy, it's going to get even tougher.
Yeah,
in
God,
this community.
Who knows? Or even better. I mean, that's my hope, right? It's just, there's no way to predict. If I've learned anything, you just cannot predict where this rocket is headed, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Well, that's a bit of a pickle, that follow-up, because I was trying to think what Marshall, would tell Marshall.
What would you tell me? You could do it that way too, Alex. You like yell at me like, dude.
Yeah. I mean, I know what I don't have to tell 2017 Marshall. I mean, your microphone and audio setup has always been top-notch.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Let's see. Maybe I would tell Jersey he's got to record a few more hours of material just to keep that in your back pocket. Yeah, I suppose for myself, I've only been around here for a couple years, so my thoughts aren't too terribly profound. Yeah, I don't know, because I guess even when I joined, things were kind of on the downswing, and I had this kind of idea of like, oh man, am I joining at a really bad time? Because I think right when I joined, it was the last homebrew con and all that, and yeah, I mean, one of the toughest things about Brülosophy is gathering up tasters, and it gets harder every month, frankly, in my local club, just because we're losing people all the time. So if I had advice, I'd love to hear it from myself.
Well, that's the thing too, is that we're more than just the podcast. You know, in fact, our bread and butter continues to be what we do over at the website, because that is what supplies us with the content to talk about on this show for the most part. And yeah, I remember when I started the experiment series, you know, and I was collecting at minimum, you know, 20 data points for, you know, that's 20 separate triangle tests. Getting people to do it, to come over to my house, it was so easy. It was not an issue. I would put out a little flyer on our local homebrew club's Facebook page, like the day of, and I'd have 25, 30 people show up to my garage. Some would just pop in to do the experiment and bounce. Other people would bring food and we'd hang out for the day. And these days, that's just not the case. I mean, it's just like I said, a different landscape. So I'll be interested to see where we head. I will say this, that yes, we've lost a lot of revenue. I'm not going to lie about that. You know, thankfully, I didn't take the advice of a lot of fans back in the day and quit my day job to run this, because there would be no way we'd be surviving right now if that was the case. But you know, we do have some padding there, and we've reorganized a little bit to allow us to keep doing this in the way that we can without breaking the bank. But yeah, I'll be interested to see where we're going, and I really do. I'm starting to get the sense that maybe things might be very, very minimally, but turning around, you know, and maybe that's just me being a little bit Pollyanna Pollyannish? I don't know, but we do appreciate that question, and I've always been a fan of the non-specifically brewing-related questions, in part because I usually don't have the hard answer because I'm not that smart. So, all right, next question comes from Arthur Olcott, who says, I've been all-grain brewing in the United Kingdom for about 8 years now. I'm really happy with the beers, and some of them even medal in national competitions. So I think my process is fairly dialed in. Over the last year, I've done a couple of 100% liquid malt extract or LME beer kits, and I've been getting a very weird aroma and flavor in those beers. Both kits have finished up with a strong burnt sugar, maybe even leaning into meaty stock/gravy browning profile. The first one was so bad it was a drain pour. This current one isn't as bad, but it still has this odd aroma and taste. The first kit was out of date, so let's just ignore that one. But this current rye IPA kit was fresh. LME was in date. I pitched 2 very fresh packets of Brü 97 yeast for a 5-gallon batch. I used distilled water with 1 teaspoon of gypsum, aerated well with an air stone, and the lag phase was less than 12 hours. The fermentation curve seemed normal. It was done after about 7 days, but finished higher than I would have expected. This is still in the fermenter, so packaging isn't a factor yet. Hence my question. Is this a typical flavor for LME kits? The taste does lean me towards the way the LME is concentrated, as it does remind me of something being boiled and reduced. Or is it an infection both times? I haven't had an all-grain infection for years, but as LME kits have a different process, maybe something is creeping in. I would have thought the quick lag phase would have been okay this time. I can't imagine it's autolysis, as this flavor profile has been there throughout fermentation.
Oof. Well, I think I get a feeling that I know what your answer is going to be, Marshall. Yeah. Hey, Arthur. Yeah, I don't know if I really know anyone who likes LME.
Yeah.
I'm going to be beating a bit of a dead horse, but it's really nothing but downsides for me compared to even DME. I mean, it's darker, it's harder to measure accurately, it's sticky, it goes bad quickly. I mean, I genuinely can't think of a good thing about it. It sounds like you're going back and using extract kits, even though you've quote-unquote graduated to all grain. So even though it's not what you asked, I thought I'd offer a quick tip that's not just like, just start doing all grain. LME is already a pretty concentrated syrup. You do not need to boil it further. All that you really want to do is sanitize it. So I would kind of point you to what people a few years ago started calling the Palmer method, after John Palmer. He recommends splitting your LME in 2, add like half at the start of the boil and the other half at 15 minutes. I personally, when I'm cursed with the plastic jug of LME, do a pretty extreme version of this method, which is very simply, I just add my LME at flame out. I mean, that's it. You'll lose so much of that kind of homebrew, quote unquote, weirdness. Which, you know, kind of a side note, it's kind of crazy how much LME darkens in the boil.
Yeah.
I'm actually kind of convinced that's the reason why a ton of all-grain brewers think that a beer boiled for 90 minutes is going to taste significantly maltier than one boiled for 60 minutes. But yeah, kind of quickly hitting the other points. Yeah, a high finishing gravity with LME. Yeah, I mean, that's super normal because LME sucks. I mean, a strong burnt sugar leaning towards gravy browning. Yeah, that's just telltale, like expired, maybe even scorched LME to me. Yeah, sorry. I usually like to blame a few things like infection, but I'm just going to go all in on blaming the devil's syrup. What about you, Marshall?
Yeah, I mean, you already know what I'm going to say. The first, I believe, 12 batches I brewed were brewed with LME. Now, I got into brewing in 2003, and at the time, the homebrew shop that I frequented is called North Corner Homebrew Supply. I believe it's still up and going up in Bellingham, Washington. What I was told was that LME is superior to DME. if you're not going to brew all grain, that it's always kind of been accepted that all grain's the best, but if you're going to use extract, go liquid, not dry. It's just a higher quality product. What I come to accept is that it's a more expensive product, and that's why they want to sell it to you. But in my experience, it is certainly the worst thing to make a batch of beer with. Again, that's my opinion. People might disagree with me, and more power to you. I've had some LME beers that taste just fine. They've never been better than what an all grain version of that beer would taste like, in my opinion. We've done, Arthur, several liquid malt extract or even just malt extract experiments. So I would encourage you to head over to brülosophy.com/experiments. That's spelled with beer, how we are nerdy and do that. But if you do that, you can actually search our table there and just search it for LME or malt extract or whatever. And all of the experiments we've done on it will come up, and you'll find that there are some that are kind of confirmed that, hey, maybe extracts aren't so bad. Those are usually dry malt extract comparisons, not LME. I don't know if we've done an LME versus DME. I can't recall, but in my experience, everything that you said about the devil's syrup liquid malt extract is exactly my experience. It's messier, it's a pain in the ass to use, and it ends up not tasting good. In my opinion, what we used to refer to as, quote, homebrew twang is LME. Whatever that is, whatever the process is for making it, which I believe is a cool evaporative process. I know that like Brees keeps they don't talk too much about how they do their LME, but I don't like it anyway. So if you share it with me, it's not like I'm going to sell your trade secret. If I'm brewing a batch with malt extract, I am using DME all day long. I've made some pretty tasty beers. Again, I think they'd probably be better if they were made all grain. But with just Pilsner malt extract and Cascade hops, you blend it together, you're done in about an hour. And yeah, that beer's going to come out drinkable and mostly as dry as you want it to be. Whereas if you did the same exact thing with liquid malt extract, my opinion is it's likely going to have that weird twangy thing. It's not going to attenuate as well. And you're probably going to have a mess to clean up, after your brew day that you wouldn't have using dry malt extract. So, is it an infection? I wouldn't be able to tell you that without putting it, under a microscope for sure, or tasting it or seeing it, whatever. My hunch is that, you've got two batches now that you're already looking at, one that was bad and you dumped, the other one that isn't tasting as good as maybe you expected. Maybe the common denominator here is the liquid malt extract, and that wouldn't surprise me one bit. So,
yeah, while you're talking, I just quickly Googled, Brülosophy LMA versus DMA, and yeah, if you pull it up, that LMA beer is brown and hazy, looks terrible. Unsurprisingly, yeah, it looks like you were the brewer and weren't a big fan of it. So
yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, go check out that article if you want to dunk on LME more. All right. Up next is Owen Dawson. They ask, I work in mental health with children and young people. I love my job and find parallels in brewing, in that both require the creative application of scientific evidence to get the best results. Do you think this is common among brewers in terms of the sorts of things they do and what they enjoy? Do their survey results shed any light on this? If not, would you include questions along those lines in the future?
Good question. I'm going to start with the last couple of questions first. Do the survey results shed any light on this? I'm not sure how our survey, our regular experiment, Hop Chronicles, and Short and Shoddy surveys would shed any light on that, because we don't ask them, our tasters what they do. But we do put out our annual general homebrewer survey every year. The 2026 one's going to be coming out probably sometime in May of next year. We are committed to doing it every year until Brülosophy no longer exists. And on that one, we do ask people what they do for a living. And it's interesting to me that certain professions, engineering, mostly science-oriented professions, make of that what you will, people from those industries do seem to be more attracted to this hobby of homebrewing. And I think maybe it's I can only surmise, but that it's like the technical aspects of the brewing that gets them. If you look at what I do, right, with Brülosophy, what I've created, I am my interest, if people don't see through what it is that we're doing, is this whole thing with perception. I am fascinated on a very deep and awkward level with the way human beings perceive things. And not just that, but the fact that perception really does seem to have a lot of subjectivity in it. That I'm not sitting here, speaking, solipsism or anything like that. That's a slippery slope. We know that. But if the mere fact that two different people can have different favorites, right? That sounds simple. We know that. But when you really dig into it, why is that? How in the world do we get there? And it's what ultimately inspired me to want to test some of these claims out. The other thing is, I've never made, I've not been shy about talking about this, is that there's something about people who engage in hobbies, homebrewing being one of those, where the Dunning-Kruger effect takes, it's obvious. It's there. You've got these people who've brewed 6 batches and who are already doling out advice to people who have brewed 4 batches, and then you've got people writing books saying you got to do this and that and this and that, or you're gonna make a bad batch. Meanwhile, no one's talking about, well, I did that and it was fine. And so that it wasn't to snub our noses at those who came before us or anything like that. That's just where my interest lies. And the fact that this is a hobby that is in 100% benign. I mean, I could, even if I was sitting here acting like one of the stupid, pod bros these days, telling people how to live their lives or how to brew their beer, and you got to do it in an unsanitized fermentation vessel because it makes better beer. There would be people out there who would listen to us and lap that up and do it. And if they liked their beer, then they're making the beer that they want. You know what I mean? It's that kind of a thing that keeps me going. So that's kind of my long-winded way of answering your response there, Owen. Yeah, you and I both work in mental health, so I'm not going to go down the whole mental health path. I'm these days, I'm no longer a clinician. I supervise clinicians now. And so oddly enough, the work that I do in my day job is very much analytical, numbers and tracking and all of that. So it's not that different from what I do here, but I'm not sure that the behaviors that went into me, treating patients really comes over into brewing as much as it is the mindset, right? That perception when I'm doing therapy with somebody, I'm thinking about the way they're perceiving the world and how that is naturally going to be different from me, and how I don't want them to ever get the idea that I'm telling them, if you just do it like me, it'll be better. All of that stuff is what built Brülosophy as well. And I would contend that more than it being my profession, it's just a part of who I am as a person. So yeah, that's where I'm at with that. I don't even know if that's what you were looking for necessarily, but that's the best I could come up with. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, maybe I'll try to be a little bit of a counterbalance to that answer. I do want to have a little bit of a homebrewer superiority complex.
Of course you do.
Yeah, I've got a vested interest, but I kind of hesitate to butter up the brewing community too much because I think, like a lot of other contributors and people in the hobby, I've had a ton of other hobbies before this one and now too, and it feels like to me a lot of people who go deep into whatever hobby they choose understandably start to value the quote-unquote science of it more.
Yeah.
I'm just going to kind of touch on a few, I suppose, to try to sell my point before everybody pitchforks me. But for example, like the photography hobby is full of kind of these in-depth discussions about, the principles of light and the laws of reciprocity and dealing with like exposure time and scene luminance, stuff like that. I even when I did airsoft in college, I was hearing very weirdly familiar fights about people arguing about the merits of propane versus electric guns.
Man.
Joined a German longsword club this month, and the guys are obsessing over statistics and geometry, and even like the most artsy hobby ever, painting, involves math for perspective, the chemistry of pigments, and the whole world of color theory. So maybe it's a bit banal, but I mean, I think you can find the beautiful marriage of creativity and science in any hobby. So sorry, I don't know if I think homebrewers are particularly special in that area.
Well, yeah, I agree with you fully. And I was thinking, you're talking about other hobbies. The other thing that I've gotten into over the last couple of years is sourdough. I've talked about it on the show before. One of the things I love about it is that it collectively takes maybe 45 minutes to an hour, but you're doing it over the course of 2 days. So it's so easy just to go, you do a stretch and fold, or throw a dough ball together, and then walk away from it and take care of life. Work on Brülosophy, stuff like that. It's the same thing. I mean, so many people just dig so deeply into the weeds. And I'm not judging that. It's whatever floats your boat. The beauty of a hobby is that you can invest that nerdy energy, that whatever you want, into it without fear of whatever. People can judge you, but who cares? It's a hobby. So yeah, and I think about that a lot. No matter where you go, you're going to find people who take it more seriously than you, and people who take it less seriously than you. And that's one of the beautiful things about it. If I think about sourdough, and which I'm not doing content creation for sourdough, my wife has forbade me from doing that with all of this stuff. But I think about that, and my approach is very similar. I feel like it was wildly informed by what I've learned over the last 20 some odd years of brewing and doing Brülosophy, that I'm not going to go. I guess part of it is that now I view these new things that I do, rather than approaching it and geeking out on the really detailed stuff. I can kind of come in and go, I've done this before, with brewing. Let me just try what makes sense based on more pragmatic, tips and what I've read. And the fact that it works, that's what matters to me. And I'm not looking to get anything else out of it. But I love questions like Owen's, though, because it does kind of force us to think outside of the box a little bit, and how who we are impacts the way that we, interact with these things that we enjoy doing, like brewing and making bread and stuff like that. So, all right, final question for this segment comes from Christian Forstel, who says, as a fellow sourdough baker, hey, speak of the devil, as a fellow sourdough baker, I'm sure you're handy with a kitchen scale, as using cups doesn't cut it precision-wise when baking bread. So real talk here. Do you brew in metric or U.S. customary units? I'll also accept a combination thereof, as I can understand sticking to Fahrenheit. I don't think you make sourdough, Alex, but the real question here is how you measure your stuff. And now I do want a quick disclaimer. I make, whether a contributor uses ounces or grams, I convert everything to the way I like it for the website. So that's on me. But what is it that you do normally in your brewing? How do you measure your stuff?
Yeah, that's first off, that's awfully presumptive of you, Marshall. I make perfectly subpar sourdough.
Oh, good.
Once every 3 months. Yeah, usually with just some beer yeast slurry, and it's never turned out well. But I make sourdough.
Hey, bread is bread, right?
Right. Yeah, it still gets eaten, or at least the compost pile eats it. Of course. Yeah. Well, and there's actually kind of a third system here too, which is percentages. I know a lot of people talk in percentages, particularly with grain bills. Actually, I don't know why I'm bringing it up, because I've actually never been particularly crazy about percentages, because like a pound of roasted malt in a 5-gallon batch is going to add a certain amount of color that's not going to be more or less just because you've got 5 pounds or 20 pounds of pale malt. But yeah, anyways, I guess, Christian, I'm a little bit metric curious. When lockdown started, I scaled my system back to about 1.5 gallons. And when I did that, I guess I realized that my mental model of how much to add to a recipe, to a batch, wasn't going to really work anyways. So I kind of put down some time, put in the work to think about everything in metric. I switched to, I guess, 10-liter batches or so. And I measured kind of everything else from liters for water, and everything else like grain and hops and grams. Celsius is pretty convenient too, of course, when 99% of what we measure in brewing is between, freezing and boiling. So a literal scale of 0 to 100 is fantastic for that reason. Yeah, and of course, measuring out your water is so much easier and intuitive in metric, and not going, okay, I've added 3 pounds and 3 ounces of water, and how do I convert that to gallons? But yeah, kind of like you said, Marshall, this kind of changed when I joined the crew, because yeah, we use a mixture of grams for hops, and imperial is kind of the default for everything else, with of course conversions on the articles. But maybe one day we can bully you into going all in on metric. But I kind of realize that probably won't happen as long as places like More Beer sell things by the pound, and I recognize it's a lot easier for someone like me to do kilograms at home when, you know, I buy grains by the sack. But yeah, how do you brew outside of articles?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. I mean, look. When I started brewing, everything was in pounds, ounces, and gallons. I measured my hops by the ounce. That's how they were sold in the homebrew store. Same with grain, you know, and then my water was always gallons. As I got, transferred into all grain brewing and started listening to podcasts and reading more websites and books and all of that stuff, I saw that grams for hops was just more precise. And I thought, well, that's an easy one to switch over to, 28.6 grams per ounce. I could figure that one out. I can interpret that one a little bit easier. So I started doing grams for hops. But I left, in my software at the time, I left grain in pounds and ounces, and I left my water volumes in gallons, and that's just kind of what stuck. I actually fully believe that 100% metric would be way easier, and I don't know why here in America we didn't just go with that. We had to stick with what we did, the imperial stuff. But here's the thing: I switched over to liters at one point. This was probably 8 years ago, just for the articles. And then I would put gallons, in the writing, and I'd just add the conversion there. And people were like, why'd you switch? So I just went back to gallons, because it doesn't matter to me. It's all the same ultimately. It's just how you measure it out. So, I'm a fan of metric, but currently, I'm only employing very minimal metric use in our articles, but I try to include the conversions, and I sometimes forget, whatever. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. If everybody were to agree, like together collectively, we're all going fully metric, I would jump right on that train and not complain about it and be cool with it. But for now, it's just easier to keep speaking the language that I've spoke my whole life, and so that's why I've got gallons for water and wort, and then pounds and ounces for grains. I guess that's the best I've got. But I have to go back to the sourdough thing. I've got a loaf that's finishing its bulk right now, and I'm going to be going and shaping it as soon as we're done recording. Absolutely do it with a scale. It's the same with brewing. You're not measuring out your grains in terms of cups, It's funny, when you hit the forums and stuff for sourdough, oftentimes the people who are asking for tips back will list out their recipe, and it'll be cups. They're measuring their flour and water and stuff in cups, and people are like, you got to weigh it out. It feels very similar to brewing, the way people do that. Like, hey, of all tips that I'm going to give you, just buy a cheap scale and start weighing your stuff out. It's not that confusing. Well, I could be telling myself that about, the gallons and the pounds, because it really isn't that confusing. But I think the main reason I do it now is just for consistency's sake. So, alrighty, well, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, more answers to your questions. Chilling work can be a chore, especially after a long brew day, but not with the Exchillerator Counterflow Chiller, which can chill a 5-gallon or 19-liter batch of wort in 5 minutes or less, leading to a strong cold break and clear wort in the fermenter. Brülosophy's Matt Del Fiacco uses the Exchillerator Max and absolutely loves it. In addition to improved chilling efficiency, every Exchillerator comes with a 5-year warranty that covers the entire chiller for manufacturer defects. If you're looking to up your chilling game and a CFC is right for you, head over to exchillerator.com today. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. Alrighty, time to answer some more questions submitted by patrons of Brülosophy. Go ahead and kick this round off, Alex.
Sure. Yeah, we've got one from someone who calls themselves, or maybe others call them, wizard scientist. Brü A 40, what an accomplishment. I can imagine it's not always easy to grind out the articles, podcasts, and now YouTube videos each and every week. I'm really interested in change and growth. How we decide to stick with something, change it, or leave it altogether. What do you do to stay motivated? If you've ever considered leaving Brülosophy or shutting it down altogether, what keeps you in the game?
Good question. So first off, what keeps me motivated? I would be lying if I just pretended that it's my love of brewing and whatever. That's like 95% of it. Don't get me wrong, but the way businesses work is that you're generating revenue, and the way that you do that a lot is that you have people giving you money that expect something in return, whether that's Patreon, whether that's a sponsor. So that on its own is like objective motivation. I have to do this, and I have no qualms with that. If anybody does, then you're going to have to start a business and see what it's like. You have to do that kind of stuff. So there's an element of it that's there. But on the more aspirational side, when it comes to the brewing stuff, the truth is that I still love it. And I think a lot of people say that to try to like prove a point or to convince people of something. My love of it today is characteristically different, qualitatively different than what it was 15, 20 years ago. It's just different. But the one thing that's the same is when I walk outside, or even when I go to a brewery and I smell the mash, or I smell that boiling wort, it is just such a strong nostalgic thing for me that takes me back to that very first batch that I brewed. And it's to this day, 500 plus batches later, it still does that. So have I ever considered leaving Brülosophy or shutting it down altogether? That I don't want to sound like I'm just, buttering people up here. I've never considered that since doing this. Now, that's not to say that I haven't sat down with my wife and talked about, is this still something that is worth doing in the way that I'm doing it, right? When we started to tank and we had to consider reorganizing the way we do things because we just couldn't pay for it. It's not that I was thinking about stopping. I knew that I would still, Brülosophy wasn't going to die altogether, but that either I was going to have to make some changes or it was going to change us, and by which I say that to mean that there was no way that we were going to pull money from our regular life that we're using to pay things like our mortgage and for our children and stuff to support a dying business. So we were very fortunate because the way we reorganized happened to at least keep us even and allow us to keep doing this without, like I've said before, without breaking the bank or causing us to go into debt or anything like that. So no, because of that, and again, thanks to our patrons, thank you, Wizard Scientist, because of your support, I haven't had to consider completely shutting it down, just changing it a little bit, and I'm open to adapting, and I remain open to adapting. That's something that I imagine is going to stick with me throughout the life of Brülosophy. So, but yeah. So have we changed? We've absolutely changed. Have we grown? We've grown. We've shrunk a little bit. I mean, that's just the nature of these things. And yeah, as it is right now, we have no plans to shut down. Also, not to kiss anybody's ass, but we also wouldn't be here if it weren't for the dedication of the contributors like Alex and Jordan and, everyone else and Will and Steve and everybody who's currently doing this. We just wouldn't be here if it weren't for people doing that. And I think that's a real sign of our dedication because, and I think you'll back me up on this, Alex, nobody's getting rich off of this thing. This is really a hobby within a hobby that we do in part because we enjoy knowing that people are benefiting from it, but also we get something out of it. It's fun to do, you know?
Yeah. Won't go into the specifics too much, but yeah, I mean, we basically get paid enough to pay for brewing in the hobby, right? Like every dollar that I get from articles goes straight into me buying grain or yeast or what have you. So I guess you guys can feel good about that too, that if you give us money, I mean, it's just going to go back into us paying, you know, for sacks of malt and whatnot. Leaving the hobby and all that, yeah, I'm going to kind of be on a similar page as you. It just hasn't crossed my mind. I like beer. I stick with this hobby because I like beer. If I stop liking beer, I'll leave the hobby. I'm not going to keep doing a hobby that I don't like. It's not a job, and it's definitely not a status symbol. So I guess I've never really been the type that's just kind of like, oh man, I'm starting to lose my love of collecting pencils or whatever. How can I like get myself to be more passionate about this? That fire just isn't there.
Yeah.
I don't know. But more power to people who have that kind of willpower. I just dip out if I'm not feeling it anymore. But I guess for a sappier answer on why maybe I'm still interested in the hobby, like kind of touching on what you said, I mean, the community here is great. The patrons, fans, the brew club in particular keeps me going. I mean, nothing soothes my soul more than, you know, a curious, humble group of people who continue to geek out about every aspect of beer. Like with the brew club, I mean, every day there's a new topic that kind of gets the gears turning. And yeah, that really, I just truly feel lucky to be part of that dorky group. And all I can really say about that, I mean, it's a great hobby. I love it, and the people are great. So why would I leave?
Yeah, no, all good points. And I guess a kind of a final point for me, you know, I think as a lot of people who have been brewing for as long as I have experienced, or anybody who's joined it and we've all seen people that once were these phenomenal brewers and really into beer just completely cut it out. I just got a text from a great friend, a current patron of ours, in fact, just letting me know, hey, I'm not drinking anymore. I'm done drinking. And so that means I don't brew anymore either. And it's like, I get that. And I don't want to judge that. I actually don't. You know, you hear a lot of voices on brewing and beer podcasts talk about, you know, their cutting back of alcohol intake and all of this. And for me to do that, I'm not saying, I'm not applying this to anybody else, just me. I would only do that if I was trying to prove some point, almost like a virtue signaling type of deal. So I don't talk much about it, but the reality is that my level of alcohol consumption these days pales in comparison to what it was 10 years ago when I was really, pushing Brülosophy as high, as much as I could. And I don't think that has any impact whatsoever on the quality of the content we produce, the amount of the content we produce. But it's different, I'm getting older. I'm pushing 45 over here, and I know that that's not, geriatric quite yet, but I want to be healthy. I've got 3 kids I want to live for, and there's no denying that alcohol is not the best thing for your health. So being able to moderate it, maybe even cutting it out completely if that's what's best for you, there's nothing wrong with that, And so I think for a lot of people, it's not that they lose the motivation to brew, it's that they lose the desire to continue drinking, specific to this hobby. And I can sort of relate with that. I'll usually go, it used to be that I'd come home from work and I'd have 2 or 3 beers with my neighbors, and maybe even more than that at times, and now I get home from work and I grab a sparkling water and hang out with my kids. It's, my teenager kids nowadays, but it's just life changes and whatnot. And I don't, if you want to judge me for that, go ahead. But it doesn't take away my experiences. It doesn't take away the fact that I still absolutely love beer. I'm just not taking in as much as I used to. And that's for me. And that's a personal matter. So, but yeah, I'm still highly motivated. Now, if you look at my brewing, I haven't brewed in over a year now because I've been prepping for a move to this new house. And you can't just, especially with electric gear, get up and going right away. You got to plan it all out. Thankfully, the temperature is starting to cool down a little bit where I live. And I was out yesterday taking measurements and getting all prepped to build out my brewery. So I'm actually very motivated to get that done so I can get back to having some beers on tap to share with my neighbors and to collect some data on. So, all right, next question. This is a fun one. Our good friend, Dick Wallace, a fellow Texan, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, though not from your neck, not from your neck of the woods there, Alex, but closer to Will, I believe. He asks, if you were a prescription, what would be on your warning label?
Okay.
Be careful here, Alex.
Yeah, a lot of ways to go here. I'll keep it PG. This is from Dick Wallace, a brew club member who's always known for the most topical, cutting-edge questions. I think we had 3 meetings in a row where he asked the host, if you were a pizza, what pizza would you be? So thank you, Dick. To determine the warning label, I think we must determine a medication. I'll go for a pretty low-hanging fruit and say that I'd be medical-grade Rogaine. However, given the cue ball-like smoothness of my scalp, and given that I'm about to be a stay-at-home parent, my warning would state, doesn't work. What about you, Dr. Schott?
It doesn't work. Oh my God. I didn't think about the medicine that I would be. And I feel like given what I do for, a living, the thing that I do that actually makes me money, I'm not sure it would be the best idea for me to try to come up with some actual existing medicine but my warning label would be take with alcohol. And the reason for that is that I tend to get a bit heady at times. I rather enjoy engaging on deeper levels. I have this weird perspective that I feel is not, if you just get on social media in the crazy fucking world we live in today, that a lot of people think that if you express an opinion that's different from theirs, that you are in some way violating a right of theirs, or that you are saying that they're less than you. And that is not how I perceive people who are different than me, or how I intend to be perceived by people who I'm different than. And so for me, I can sit down with somebody who has a completely different, religious, political, social, whatever it is, perspective than me, or beer related, and not get offended by them doing things differently than me. Unfortunately, I feel like a lot of people are immediately offended when they hear us say something like, you can ferment a lager warm, and it might turn out pretty good. That is the very G version of differences that I share with other people. And so that's why I say take with alcohol, because when you're drinking and you have that nice little 2-beer buzz, as I like to refer to it, it might be a little bit easier to recognize that nobody's trying to hurt your feelings. Nobody's trying to, change your mind necessarily. And so that's, I went a little bit deeper on that one than I think Dick may have intended, but that's what I'm saying. As Marshall being the medicine, take with alcohol.
No, that's very clever. I like it quite a bit. Yeah, exactly. We're all, this hobby is filled with all different types of people, and I think that's a beautiful thing, and that's a very nice sentiment.
Well, thank you. Take with alcohol, Alex.
Yeah, sounds great. Better than doesn't work.
Yeah, will do.
All right. This next question is from Pat Souza. I think I'll go ahead and co-author this question.
Yeah.
What is Jersey up to? How about Malcolm, Matt, and Kate Job?
Yeah, so I don't want to speak for any past contributors, still friends of mine. I stay in touch with all these folks, maybe not as much as we used to when they were parts of Brülosophy. Obviously, I think that's natural. But yeah, so I'm going to be very, very general because they can speak to the details of what it is they're up to. And I've actually talked with some other folks about potentially having, past contributors record a quick 1 minute blurb about what it is they're up to these days, just because I get this question a surprising amount. Understandably, we've had a lot of people. Brülosophy was built on the backs of a lot of people whose voices you no longer hear, whose names are no longer attached to articles. And we have so much thanks to give those people because, again, it was built through their work. So Jersey is currently living in Oklahoma with his family. He retired from the military and got a job where he travels a lot now doing stuff for fighter pilots, which I think is really cool. I haven't heard from him recently, but I hear that he may be planning a trip back to our area, so hopefully we'll be able to catch up soon. Malcolm is working at Late Edition Brewing and Blending out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. For those of you who have been listening for a long time, you probably recall him talking about moving from his original job, I believe, as some sort of a naval engineer or something like that, and jumping into the professional world of brewing, which he was doing like sensory analysis stuff. I think he even had a stint there where he was working for Miller Coors or something. He spent some time in Atlanta, Georgia, and then ultimately ended up back in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, working at Late Edition. I'm not entirely sure what his professional title is there, but that's what he's doing, and seems to really be flourishing and having a great time. Matt Del Fiacco, he again, another person who was around for a long time. He and I actually met through his moderating the subreddit, the homebrewing subreddit, and then he joined the crew and he kind of abandoned that role. I think rightfully so, did a lot of good work for us. And then he became a father, and I believe he now has 2 children and is just living the dad life. And did, obviously 2 small kids, very difficult to keep brewing. Don't ask me how I was able to do it. But so that's what he's up to as far as I know. I don't want to speak too much for him. Cade, the whole reason that he had to back out of what it is we're doing here, we still consider Cade a member of the crew. He's just so busy doing working towards his PhD in brewing science. So he's still up at Oregon State doing the brewing science thing, working with Tom Shellhammer, which is absolutely phenomenal. We look forward to seeing what he does once he completes that program and all of his education. We've got some other folks. Brian Hall, still up in Alaska. I just saw an amazing photo of a bar that he built in his house, just like this cool tiki bar looking thing, still brewing and stuff as far as I know. You've got Phil Rusher, who is out. I haven't talked to him since I think last December, but he's still out east doing his thing. Mike Neville, same thing. So yeah, all these guys still living their lives. A lot of the reason that, it's never, as far as I know, there's no drama between us and any past contributors. In fact, I think Ray Found, who was one of our first contributors, just went on a trip to Oktoberfest or something like that. And he and I talk about camping occasionally. So no bad blood. It's just that, life got in the way, and that I will tell this to every contributor we have now. That always takes, the cake when it comes to contributing to Brülosophy. Your real life is always going to be more important than your beer life. So that's what I've got. What were you going to add to it? Did you have something, Alex?
Yeah, maybe. I had comment about Jersey, but I'm not sure if I should add it.
Maybe not. He's an interesting fellow. We all know that.
All right. Yeah, because I was going to be like, to be real, I'm glad you were talking about Jersey, and boy, I shouldn't admit this, but I skipped most of those 1 minute beer reviews the first year that I listened to the podcast.
You and a lot of people, I imagine.
Yeah, because at the time that I started listening to the podcast, I was like very actively looking for a podcast that didn't have that like bro-y shock jock humor of some notable other podcasts, and I just assumed like, oh, this must be what this is. But I'll admit I was wrong, and I've since seen the light, and I really should just go back and listen to that, all those shenanigans from the old reviews. But yeah, I guess touching on the other guys, yeah, I mean, I won't reveal too much of what goes on behind the curtain of Brülosophy, but the group chat that we've got going on is a very sweet, very wholesome space.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not surprising at all to hear all those dudes are still on good terms with you, and that's good to hear that they're all doing well.
Well, yeah, I mean that's at least my impression. Maybe they're not in their worlds and they just haven't let me know. But I'm not gonna have you talk about how I am, in private. But just because I feel like that's like patting my own back or whatever. But yeah, I mean it's the way part of my kind of life philosophy. And I talk to people that I work with in my real job, about this, is that I want to just be consistent. So the way I am on this show is the same way that I am with my friends and my family. It's the same way that I am at work. It was the same way that I was with patients that I met with, for better or for worse. And I'm not saying that the way I am is the best way I can be. I'm constantly open to adapting if it's going to improve the lives of others and myself. And so I apply that. It's not an active application. I don't even really think about it much. I just try to be consistent because to me, it makes life easier. It makes living easier. And so my hope is that those guys have some appreciation for the whatever it is that we provided for them, because we have massive amounts of appreciation for everything, the investment that they put into Brülosophy. We wouldn't be here today if it weren't for them. So. All right, next question comes from Rune Millerjord, who says, if I need to step up a starter, how should I do that? Are there any, quote, rules on the ratio between the different levels, as in if the second step should be at least twice the volume of the first? Do I need to decant between levels? And if I do I need to chill it until bright before doing so? It really feels like a guessing game. If you haven't stepped up a starter, Alex, I imagine you have, but I'd be curious what your thoughts are on it at least.
Yeah, I have. But I guess I'd like us to all forget what I said about kindness and civility between contributors a minute ago. This is truly a topic that divides us. The topic of yeast starters. I'm part of the crazy crew that likes them, along with Martin and Jordan. Yeah. However, it probably shouldn't be surprising that I'm more of the vibes-driven yeast rancher. But I'll just kind of quickly go over what would be standard practice if you want to do that, Rune. You would just kind of add your yeast to about 1 liter, more or less if you want, of a 1040 OG wort. Let that yeast rip for 24 or 48 hours. Decant, crash, and then pitch that yeast into a larger, maybe 2 liter 1040 OG wort for a couple days. Do the same thing, cold crash, decant, and pitch the yeast. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, but that's not really what I do anymore. Most of the time, as Marshall was talking about in terms of, opinions and stuff, and I'm sure this will annoy a good number of people because for whatever reason, yeast starters get people really riled up. I guess we all love our little guys, but I think most of the time that people step up a starter, it's a little bit unnecessary. I rarely do them even with my frozen yeast bank. That said, I use the 30 milliliter tubes instead of the 10 milliliter tubes for that very reason, because a lot of people just end up dumping 2 of those 10 milliliter tubes, and the 30 milliliters are just a lot easier to work with in every way. But part of the reason I say that is I've kind of over time become more in the vitality over the viability camp. If I had to pick, I would trust kind of a small group of happy yeast over a large group of sluggish yeast. And one way to have happy yeast, just because you're asking, is to kind of treat them in a way that we normally wouldn't do as brewers. Kay Job and friends on the Brew Lab have talked about increasing the nitrogen to carbon ratio in starters. You can use 5 times, maybe even more, of what the manufacturer tells you to use. I personally like the Y yeast nutrient, but you can use whatever you want. Similarly, if you want to have a compounding effect, you'll get twice as many cells if you use a starter that's warmer than room temps, like closer to 85, 90 degrees Fahrenheit, like proper garage temps. And also, speaking of the Brü Lab, you can get a slightly better ratio of yeast per unit of sugar if you dilute your starter. You don't have to go crazy like Maria Mutzaglou did with a 10-10 starter. Even though I've done it, before for fun and great success, all you really need to know is that the drop-off on efficiency there is like 1040, which is, I believe, why that's been the standard before, even though it's not the most efficient wort. So if you do those like kind of three things, if you really crank out yeast nutrient far more than is recommended, let that yeast go up to like 90 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe dilute the wort a bit. Your yeast is going to be very happy, but your yeast starter will not at all be pleasant. While it's usually okay, in my opinion, to dump in your yeast starter undecanted, if you go for this method, I would decant, maybe 2/3 of the liquid, because all of that yeast nutrient is going to have this like intense ammonia smell. Yeast that's fermenting in your garage is not going to be putting off pleasant esters. Let's see. I guess while we're kind of talking about this, it's also worth mentioning that a second type of stepping up that several people do in the brew club, which is pitching on a yeast cake.
Pissing on a yeast cake.
Yeah. I was thinking about urea, and then the wires crossed in my brain.
Of course.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you could try pitching on a yeast cake if you've got some sluggish yeast, because you can get 2 or more batches out of beer with just a boring old jar of old yeast. On your question about like decanting and chilling and all that, I typically just decant for space's sake, because I don't think most of the time, unless you do that overboard, yeast nutrient blast I talked about, I really don't think adding like half a liter or a liter of starter wort is really going to make a huge impact in your final beer if you're doing like a 5.5 gallon batch. Just relating to decanting, I know that we're worried that it feels like a bit of a guessing game, but frankly, I am going to be in that camp of just, decant to where you feel comfortable, where you're not going to feel like you're going to accidentally dump your yeast down the drain. And I also kind of think, personally, chilling yeast is a little silly. After we just put in all that effort to make them happy, putting them to sleep isn't my MO. Strike that out if you're planning on harvesting it, of course, because it's infinitely easier to harvest yeast that's flocculated. So I guess I would say it's not so much as a guessing game as much as it is, it doesn't have to be complicated or an exact science. Sorry if that was rambly. I think yeast is one of those things where I just start talking and forget what point I'm making. But,
well,
so anyways, what do you think, guy who doesn't make starters?
Yeah, I was going to say amen. Next question. So here's the thing. I fully agree. I've stepped up starters several times. It's not that I'm against starters. It's that I'm very pro these yeast labs who are producing such high quality yeast with such such a high cell count nowadays that they're actually selling to homebrewers, that if there's really no need, then there's no need. Now, I'm not, I don't like Kool-Aid. We'll just put it that way. So just because I do something different than you heard on another podcast or whatever doesn't mean that I'm saying you shouldn't do that. You do whatever the hell you want. I don't care. But my thing is that while the process you outlined, Alex, is one that I fully stand behind and I agree with, and if you're going to recommend that people step up starters using that method, I think they're probably going to get away with a very successful stepping up. But here's how I do it. It's way more based on my, arguably minimal understanding of microbiology and yeast fermentation and stuff like that. So I'm going to presume that I'm taking a bottle of beer that we know was carbonated with the same yeast that lines the bottle of the bottom of that bottle. and you want to step it up for use in your brewery, you're going to have to step that up if you want to get, good viability. And so what I would do is, pour that beer out into a glass, pour that whatever tiny little amount of yeast is at the bottom into a flask, add about half a liter of wort, let that ferment out on a stir plate. I'm still pro stir plate. I know a lot of people aren't. Throw that on a stir plate, let it ferment out for maybe 36 hours or so. And then I'm going to let it settle, maybe in the fridge, maybe not, whatever floats your boat. It'll be faster if you put it in the fridge. And decant it off, add another half a liter of starter wort, let that go for another 24 to 36 hours. Do the same thing until the amount of yeast that's sitting at the bottom, it's obviously going to have some proteins and stuff like that from the wort, but that yeast will propagate if you do that. Once it gets to the point where it sort of looks like the amount that you would get from a fresh pitch, then I would probably do like one more step. And as long as it's smelling how I would expect it to smell, I would do maybe a liter and a half, depending on what I'm pitching that yeast into ultimately. Let it go again. So maybe 3 steps. And then I'm pitching that full thing undecanted, unless I only decant if my starter is over 2 liters. That's just a thing that I started doing. If it's anything under 2 liters, so basically an ale, I just don't decant. I add the whole thing to the 5-gallon batch. That doesn't bother me. I've never noticed anything from that. But yeast want a yeast. They want to do their thing. They're going to ferment. Even if you were to pitch that tiny little amount, it's still going to ferment. You just may get some weird off flavors because of how stressed that yeast is, being, the viability being so low. So in my mind, I don't need to know, the exact number of cells or, I like all those pitch rate calculators. Thank you for producing those. I'm glad they're there for the people who want to know. To me, as long as there's a good enough amount of yeast, you're good to go. That's my honest opinion. So that's how I've done it in the past. I've followed calculators and stuff to step up starters. Don't get me wrong. It ends up doing the same exact thing. I just feel like when I do it the way that you're supposed to, I have this like false sense of confidence with how many cells are in there. Whereas when I do it my way, it's a little bit more based on feel, but you're probably still getting about the same number of cells based on how much you're stepping it up. So that's my take. I know it's a little bit more willy-nilly, and I'm okay with that. I wouldn't recommend other people do it unless you feel like being willy-nilly like me. So yeah, I mean, what do you think of my approach? It's basically the same thing, just without all the thought put into it, right?
Yeah. It's a very similar thing. I think it's really, as long as you do something nice for your yeast, like just give it some starter wort, give it some oxygen, it's going to be happy. All this stuff, I guess I should have had a disclaimer that you kind of touched on, that the only reason that I bother with all this stuff with yeast starters is because I like harvesting yeast, and I want to use that yeast later. If you're just pitching straight from a packet or a pouch these days in 2025, yeah, you're right. It probably really doesn't matter. The yeast that labs send us these days is by and large fantastic, ready to go. So when you mention, Rune, that if I need to step up a starter, when you say need, I'm assuming that you have some spent yeast that you've been harvesting and all that. If it's just because you're making a 1050 blonde ale and you've got enough yeast for 1045, then you probably are going to be fine enough. Because, this is a total side topic, but I mean, those if you don't have a microscope, those yeast pitch calculators are also a guessing game as well, and are much more vibey than they pretend to be. Go ahead.
All I was going to say before we get to the final question here, which is going to be a fun one, is that yes, I was going to agree that these yeast pitch calculators, while they're based on math and science, and that makes sense, and yes, in an ideal world, those numbers would line up, there's still an element of trust that goes into those. And my thing is, it's very difficult to truly, not to overpitch, but to get negative effects from overpitching. If you have ever pitched a fresh wort onto a complete yeast cake, you know what I'm talking about. It works. It works perfectly fine. That's not to say that it will never, produce off flavors or have some unique, impact on your beer. but it works. And so there's no way you're ever going to step up a starter enough in a 2-liter flask to get the amount of yeast that is at the bottom of a fermentation vessel post-fermentation. So that's where my argument comes from, is when it looks like you've got enough yeast in there. Again, when the actual matter at the bottom of your flask or jar or whatever it is you're using looks to be, maybe even more than what you're getting in a pouch, pitch that stuff and you're off to the races. It's got good viability. It's got good vitality at that point. So that's where I'm at with that. Again, a lot of people really enjoy the more technical side of things. And if that's you, then do it the other way. That's totally fine. So,
yeah. And then, like you said, the yeast wants to eat it. The yeast probably aren't going to look around and be like, hey guys, there's only 200 billion of us. I'm going to eat this amount and then stop.
Don't be prejudiced against yeast, dude. Come on.
All right. Before I say anything terrible about our good friends, we'll move on.
All right.
Final question comes from William Babcock, a.k.a. Whiskey Will. He asks, what do you find to be the most difficult thing about running Brülosophy? And conversely, what do you find to be the most rewarding?
God, I feel like I could potentially get a little bit redundant with this one, because we've had a lot of more personal questions on this episode than usual. I think that's kind of a function of the fact it's our 400th. And again, we put meaning in these every 100th episodes. So appreciate the question, Will, as well as all the whiskey and gin you've sent me and the beers over the years. Real good guy, friend of the show. The most difficult thing about running Brülosophy, I think, I'm going to start with kind of a temporal perspective. Back in the day, the most difficult thing for me was, one, they kind of go together. There was these two aspects of it. One was making sure that we generate revenue and figuring out ways to do that so that we could pay for all of this stuff. You have to remember, I didn't start this with the idea of it becoming what it is today. I started this, the website, just as a place to document the experiments that I was doing on my own in my garage, because I was getting bored with the other aspects of brewing. That's what kept me motivated. Well, in finding a way to cover the costs as we grew and we grew and we grew, the secondary difficult thing was coming to terms with the fact that there are people out there who enjoy the content we create, but cannot tolerate the fact that we make money off of it, that we had to take on sponsors and stuff like that. And so, again, I would say about 7-8 years ago is when I was finally kind of, therapeutically coming to terms with the fact that that's okay. I don't care if people like that or not. I have to do what I have to do to make sure that we can continue producing the stuff that you're listening to anyways. I remember listening to the Brewing Network back in the day before Brülosophy was a thing, and hearing them say things like, hey, you're getting this content for free. And you're going to sit, and it's the people who are getting it for free who are the most apt to complain about the fact that we're generating revenue off of it. Well, if that's you, you're welcome. I don't know what else to tell you. And so that was probably the most difficult thing. And since William is asking about running Brülosophy, I will say that today, the most difficult thing is just ensuring that we're able to cut even, to break even. We're in a weird state in brewing, particularly in home brewing, but in the overall beer world. And so really being cognizant, I've had to kind of invest a lot more mental energy into thinking about and considering how we might have to maneuver and pivot in the future to make sure we're able to keep doing this thing. I can talk hard numbers. I'm not a big fan of doing that. Over the last 8 years, we've lost almost 7, I believe it's almost 8 at this point. 8 sponsors over the last years that had to force us to find other ways to pay for things. We've lost almost 30% of our Patreon revenue over the last 5 years or so. Understandably, people are leaving the hobby. People aren't brewing anymore. Why are they going to give us $3-5 a month, whatever it is, when they're not even engaging in the hobby anymore? I get that. And I'm not complaining, but that's why we talk about it as much as we do. So that would probably be the most difficult thing about running Brülosophy, is the business side of it. Other than that, there's really nothing else. There was a minute there where I'd be like, are we going to be able to keep contributors? I understand they're living their life. I always encourage them to take a step back if this is getting in the way of their real lives, because that's far more important to me. But there was times where I've wondered, like, man, are we going to be able to find people to cover and to keep doing what we're doing? But right now, I just feel like we're kind of riding a very, very shallow wave, but we're kind of riding it. We're feeling things out and we're doing our thing, and we haven't had any issues coming up with content. So that's been nice. As far as rewarding, this sounds hella cheesy, and I get that. But to me, I have some of the closest friends that I've made in my life. Alex, you being one of them, the other contributors making up the rest of that group, because of Brülosophy. And to me, on a heartfelt level, that is the most rewarding side of it. Again, maybe if this thing was generating millions of dollars a year or something, I would say it was the money. I think people probably presume that anyways. It's not the money, I promise you. I could let this thing go right now and walk away from it, and what I would miss the most is talking with somebody else every week for this show, is coordinating with contributors on articles and laughing at the stupid jokes and getting pictures of your guys' families and what you guys are doing on the weekends. And, that is what I love. I'm a cheeseball. And so for me, that's what's the most rewarding. Now you don't run Brülosophy necessarily, Alex. So I'm going to just shift the question a little bit to what has been the most difficult and most rewarding things about contributing to Brülosophy in your time with us.
Yeah. Well, that was very sweet, Marshall. And yeah, you are a cheeseball.
Thank you.
I'll keep it kind of short since, like you said, we've touched on all of this today. I mean, by far the hardest thing about it being a contributor is finding 24 people to drink free beer and take a survey about it.
You'd think it'd be so easy, right?
I know. Yeah. When I joined, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the brewery. There's going to be like 50 people. They're all going to be like, oh shit, free beer, and come over. And instead, people think I'm trying to twist their arm when I give them free beer and show them a QR code. So I'm like, what's the catch? Doubly so because, our experimental beers by design are super boring. Most of them anyways. So
you're not impressing anybody with your experiment beers, that's for sure, right?
No. There's kind of this funny push and pull we've got going on. I'm sure we've talked about before, where our readers want our beers, very understandably, and I agree with them, to be as boring and neutral as possible. And drinkers in my local club are like, oh my God, Alex, another blonde ale?
What'd you do this time, right?
Right, exactly. And they're like, do you ever make anything good? Yeah. But I'll meet you on a similar cheese level when it comes to the most rewarding thing. The most rewarding thing is the friends we made along the way.
That's right. I was telling in the last episode last week, which we're recording both of these episodes in the same weekend, so Alex hasn't had the opportunity to listen to it yet. I was talking with Martin about you and me sitting in the bathtub in Houston, drinking beers that we got at the little mini mart in the hotel, and it's those types of experiences that I do this for. I mean, whether it's a contributor or somebody who listens to the show, our I guess ethos is everyone is welcome, and blame that on my my religious past. I don't know. Whatever, something stuck with me though, that I just like people in general. And I know that's not like the popular thing to say. It's like become trendy to pretend that you hate people. I'm not one of those people. I like them. I like differences. I like the fact that one person loves stout and another person loves German Pilsner, and we can come together and drink IPA, and apply that to other realms of existence. And I promise you it works with me. That's just how I am as a person. And I always look forward every day with Brülosophy. There's a point to where I'm like, man, where are we going to be in 5 years? When am I going to meet up with Steve in Chicago? And when am I can't wait to go down to San Antonio and go to a country concert with Will. It's stuff like that. And it may not happen right away, but the ability for us to stick together and to do this thing, I would contend that part of the reason we feel, or at least I feel, that we're kind of riding a bit of a wave right now is because of just how congealed the current set of contributors are. And I'll be honest, it hasn't always been that way. We've had times where one contributor takes issue with another one, and there's a little bit of a riff. And back then I remember thinking my role was to mend those and to kind of tamp down the temperature a little bit. And it's not like that anymore. It's just we're all friends, and I'm constantly seeing, oh, Jordan is in Chicago and hanging out with Steve, or you and me meeting up in Houston. It's just happening all the time. And who would have guessed that this silly little homebrewing thing would have created that for this group of people who seem to enjoy that, And so again, absolutely the most rewarding thing for me is that I'm also very touched by again, to stick with the cheese a little bit here. We get a surprising amount of feedback that not all of it do I share on the show, because I feel like that kind of minimizes the potency of what some of these people have to say. But, my natural inclination, I actually have to rein it in on this show, is to go deeper than just the surface. I think that's kind of what motivated me to go into the profession I'm in. It's why I like the more, perceptual side of brewing and such, is because, again, I like people, and we get this feedback from folks who will just comment on one thing they heard one of us say on an episode, and it really impacted them. It touched them on some level, and that in turn ends up really impacting and touching me. And I just feel so fortunate to have the opportunity in this very, very, I think lambasted hobby, alcohol. We still have some pretty puritanical beliefs in this country. The fact that we can make more of it than just the alcohol side of it is so incredibly rewarding to me. I feel like Brülosophy has given me an outlet to be this very natural way that I am, that doesn't come across as pushy, and so I could go on for hours, but that's where I'm at with that. And that does bring us to the end of our 400th episode. I still can't believe we've made it 400 episodes. Thank you all so much for allowing us to get to this point, for listening to our voices drone on for over 500 hours at this point. It really does mean the world to us again. And especially thanks to our patrons for supporting us and submitting questions. You're a priority for a reason, and I'm not going to hide behind behind that piece of it. You are the reason we're here. And those were some really fun questions you gave us for this episode. Alex, do you have anything else before we wrap this one up?
No, man, that was all beautifully said. These are always fun to both listen to and be a part of. I'm sure episode 410 will be a blast. And I guess I hope we get a special California edition for episode 420.
California or Oregon or Washington, West Coast, we can do that. If somebody twists my arm, hard enough, maybe we can make that a thing. So, well, if there's anything you'd like for us to address in a future Brü A episode, first you can consider becoming a patron of Brülosophy, because we do prioritize their questions. In fact, every question in this episode came from our patrons. Or you can always email your questions to feedback@brülosophy.com, and we'll eventually get around to answering them, I presume. Just indicate that it's for Brü A in the subject line, so we're sure to add it to the list. Don't forget to check out the Brülosophy Show, where host Martin Keene is creating some truly awesome content. You can find it over at youtube.com/@thebrülosophy Show, or just search YouTube for Brülosophy and you'll find it. And make sure to head to brülosophy.com to keep up with all of the fun beer and brewing stuff we are up to. The Brülosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors, as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brülosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brülosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brülosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey, cause it suits my throat. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no more.